the tabernacle. This is what the tabernacle looked like. Let me make sure it's optimized. It's supposed to be. Okay. All right, let's go. Here we go. This is what the Mishkan, the tabernacle, looked like in the desert. And in the when they came to Shilo, the city of Shilo. Basically, there needed to be a place where God Almighty would repose as the central address. Now, what does that mean? We don't say God is everywhere, omnipresent. Isn't God here in Irvine and Arutz Israel, everywhere in Israel and everywhere in the world? What does that mean? He's living in a house. It means, the example I give is, imagine you're in your home and it's black dark at midnight. You can't see a thing, you'd be tripping over your own feet. And you've got the whole downstairs or upstairs or one floor, and you turn on a light bulb, a ceiling light, a basic ceiling light in the center of your floor. In my home, it would be the dining room. So the downstairs is completely black, dark. On one side, there's the living room. On one side, there's the kitchen, let's say. In between, there's the dining room. And I turn on only the dining room light for the dining room. The dining room will be bright. But you know what? If I go in the kitchen, it's no longer black dark. I can see. Not the way I could in the dining room where the center of the light is, but it still permeates. Likewise, the other direction in the living room. That's sort of a way I try to explain what we mean when we say that God's presence, his Shekhinah, his essence of presence, is located in the Holy Temple or in the Mishkan, the Tabernacle. He's everywhere in the world. But that central bulb in the dining room, that center of his essence, is in his home, his house. So in the desert, when the Jews got out of Egypt, they built a Mishkan, a tabernacle, and it was portable. They brought it with them wherever they went. And it had two staves, one on each side, two staves. And we saw on Sunday, when we talked about it in a different context of the Kohanim crossing the Jordan River, we saw a picture of sort of how it looked, where a man or two would hold the rod on the front left, another on the back left, and likewise on the right side, one or two would hold it on the front right, one or two would hold it on the front, on the rear right. And that's how they would carry it. It was portable. And so they were able to carry God's house, as it were, portably through the desert until they finally entered the land of Israel, and it rested in Shilo. The city's called Shilo. In English, it's called Shiloh. And it stayed there for 369 years. And only in what we're going to study today, did it end up losing its permanence in Shiloh as the Jews brought it into battle. So we're going to learn about it more today. Now, again, to give you a picture of where we're talking in the greater frame of Israel, here's the Mishkan. There's that the encampment with those sheets around it. There's the Mishkan itself. By the way, to the degree that you see these, not a single cursor, but like 4 or 5 cursors doing kind of stuff like an aquarium of a lot of little circle fish, that's on purpose. It's after much trial and error. While maybe 1 or 2 people would find it a little annoying, other people who have expressed that they had some trouble following the cursor on their smartphones or other Zoom devices, this is to help you when I'm moving it to really spot where I am. But as a courtesy, once I help you find where I am, I'll just keep it still. And so it won't be like 6 or 7 circles all at once, but a single one. So anyhow, people would come to the Mishkan. And then when they got to the Mishkan, the tabernacle, they would pray near it. It's located at, again, in English, Shiloh, but actually it's the city Shilo, in the land of Ephraim. You'll remember Rachel has 2 children, Yosef and Binyamin, Joseph and Benjamin. And Joseph, Yaakov Avinu, our father Jacob, said to Joseph that I will count your two sons born in Egypt, Ephraim and Manasseh, as a tribe each. The idea being that those two of the next generation were extraordinary. Unlike the children of Reuven and Levi and Shimon and Yisachar and Zevulun and Dan and Naphtali and Gad and Asher and all the other tribes who were born to their parents and families as part of a general Jacob community, Bnei Israel, the Jews living together. Yosef lived in isolation from the rest of the family in Egypt, while everybody else was in the land of Canaan, what would one day become Israel. So Yosef was living alone in isolation, the only Jew in all of Egypt. Eventually, he's married off by the Paro to someone named, and it's interesting because the wife he's given, she may have been the daughter of Potiphar, and there's even an opinion that she's the daughter of the rape of Leah, of Leah's daughter Dinah, when Shechem raped her in chapter 34 of Sefer Breshit, book of Genesis. Her daughter, it may be that that's whom Yosef eventually married, and they raised two children. They reared two children in Egypt, Manasseh and Ephraim. And Yaakov said they are extraordinary young men because they came out every bit as Jewish as the rest of the family, having been raised nevertheless in exile, in isolation. So therefore, that will be the blessing you are to give for Jewish boys, Jewish men, the rest of eternity. Yisimcha Elokim ke Ephraim v'Manasseh. May God bless you to be like Ephraim and Manasseh, even if you do not grow up among a Jewish community in Israel, but you grow up in the exile, even an exile like Orange County, California, or even worse, Idaho, Nebraska, I don't know. So may God bless you, any boy who grows up, that you should ultimately come out like Ephraim and Manasseh. So Yaakov designated them as tribes, so that when the land would be divided, each of them would get their own tribal land. And as a blessing to Rachel, Rachel, so Ephraim and Manasseh are the sons of Rachel's son Yosef, and Benjamin is the other one. And indeed, what ends up happening is that for 369 years, the Tabernacle, the Mishkan, is in the land of Ephraim, and ultimately will reach God's home, will be established as a permanent place, not portable, that's carried by a few guys holding, Kohanim holding the rods, but a permanent home, the Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple, will be built in Benjamin, in the tribal area of Benjamin, in Jerusalem on Mount Zion, which is where the term Zionism comes from. Zionism comes from the name Mount Zion, Mount Moriah, the mountain where the Temple Mount. And so when you're a Zionist, you're basically someone who believes Jews should be at the Temple Mount and should have the Temple Mount. Until 1967, for 2,000 years, we were exiled and others held the Temple Mount. Only in 1967, during the Six-Day War, did we miraculously see, by God's miracles, the Jews liberate the eastern part of the city of Jerusalem, unify the city. It's no longer East Jerusalem, it's now the eastern part of Jerusalem, and liberate the Temple Mount. The tragedy was that Moshe Dayan was actually quite a coward in many ways. People don't know. In America, we don't know the whole story. We get the story that the news media portray, and when the news media likes someone, they make this guy or woman into a hero. And when they don't like someone, they take a good person, they make him into a villain. And most people don't know. So for the last month, if you've been reading the media, you would think Bibi Netanyahu is a Nazi. and anti-democratic. And that Israel right now is in the process of removing all democracy, and it's going to become like Nazi Germany with yarmulkes. And that's what you know if you read the media. If you actually read some of the Hebrew media and you know what's going on, you know it's just the opposite. And you know what's going on. Well, in the same way, the media always have loved the Labor Party socialist leaders of Israel in the old days. So, like you talk about Golda Meir to an American Jew, she's like the greatest hero. She's like, she's the greatest hero. Talk to Israelis whose children were killed during the 1973 Yom Kippur War. 3,000 Jewish kids were killed during the Yom Kippur War. Talk to their parents about Golda Meir and about how she had advance notice that Sadat was going to attack Israel on Yom Kippur, and she made a strategic decision not to preemptively attack because she didn't think it would be good publicity for Israel if the media reported that Israel started the war. And she even decided, in order to not preemptively attack, don't let the boys on the front know that they're about to be attacked, because otherwise they're going to say, we're not going to sit like sitting ducks. So they were hit by surprise. Only the top intelligence in the Israeli government knew it was coming. So what ends up happening very often, we don't get the whole story. And in the same way that we don't get that whole story, we don't get the whole story about what happened in 1967. Israel liberated Mount Zion, where the Holy Temple was. And Moshe Dayan, who's a big, big hero in America, has got the eye patch because to the degree that a person wounded in battle and loses an eye automatically becomes a hero, he truly is a hero. He was wounded in battle. There's no question about it. He was heroic, courageous in battle. But as a defense minister, he wasn't the same. When he had time to think about it, not under the heat of war, he made the decision not to extend sovereignty over the Temple Mount. And it's a whole long story we can't continue going into right now, but it's because of him that the decision was made that Israel will not be sovereign over the Temple Mount, but instead will give it to Jordan. And that even though we now have liberated the eastern part of Jerusalem in 1967, we will allow Jordan to continue to remain sovereign over the Temple Mount. And it's been 50 years of a hassle ever since then, back and forth. To this day, it is illegal for a Jew who goes up the Temple Mount to recite a prayer. I'm not talking about a 2-hour Shabbat morning davening. You're not allowed to say a simple bracha, Baruch Hashem Elokeinu Melech shehakol niyeh b'dvaro, to say a blessing, a one-sentence blessing to drink water. You will be arrested if the police catch you reciting a blessing, because under the agreement with the Arabs, no Jew is allowed to recite a prayer on the Temple Mount by virtue of the agreement that Dayan made, because the plan was we're going to give the land back in exchange for peace. And of course, 60 years later, that doesn't seem to have been the plan that worked out. Back to this. So we're learning about the area. And here's Shilo. Here's Jerusalem, not too far away. And now let's get into the text. We're going to start from chapter 3. We had learned chapters 1 and 2 of the book of Shmuel Aleph, 1 Samuel. And then we had to stop classes because my interstitial lung disease had me close to death. My darling Denise forced me against my will to go to Cedar Sinai Hospital and get an evaluation. I didn't want to go to the doctor. I'm normally pretty good about going to the doctor, but I kind of delayed on that one because I knew from what I had read, when you get a transplant, the clock starts ticking for as long as your body holds it until God forbid there's a rejection. So I kept trying to delay, but Denise schlepped me to Cedar Sinai. We were after chapter 2 and went for my evaluation, and the pulmonary team said, you came on a good day because tomorrow you'll be dead. If you go to sleep tonight, you're probably not going to wake up tomorrow. So you better admit yourself right now. You all know the story. I didn't go home for 4 months, got myself a new lung and all of that stuff. Lost my hair. Hair is coming back. I still have the lung. So let's get to chapter 3, where we left off. Thank God we're able to do this. And thank God the book waited for us. Okay. Bahanar Shmuel Mishareted Hashem, Lefnei Eli. As you'll remember, from the book of Shmuel, chapter 1, which we read every year as the Haftarah on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. Chanah desperately wanted to have a baby. She was married to someone named Elkanah, who also had a wife, Penina. Polygamy was appropriate and permitted in those days. And Penina had children. Chanah did not have a child. She was barren. And she went to the Mishkan and cried and prayed. And she was promised she would have a baby. And she promised that she would give that baby to the Kohen, the high Kohen of the Mishkan, to serve God. And now we join our story in progress, chapter 3. That little boy has been given to Eli the Kohen and has grown up under the tutelage of the high Kohen Eli. And he's now a young man, Shmuel or Samuel. It's kind of interesting that when King James, when they translated the Bible from Hebrew into English, they couldn't just stick with the names. I mean, Shmuel can be written in English, Shmuel. It's really not that hard. And yet it's Samuel, Yitzchak. Okay, so Americans can't say ch. But Abraham could have been written A-V instead of A-B. Avraham. It's not that hard. Yaakov could have been Y-A-apostrophe-A-K-O-V instead of Jacob. And I mean like Moshe, M-O-S-H-E instead of Moses. It's sort of all these names. And it puts me to double work because I have to say them both ways. So anyway, it's important to know the name was Shmuel. And Shmuel Mashredet Hashem of Eli. So Shmuel has been growing up to serve God under the tutelage of Eli or Eli. Udevar Hashem haya yakar bayamim hahem ein chazon nifratz. God did not often reveal himself. On that day, and Eli was now in his 90s, and he was nearly blind from old age. Of course, they did not have the, they did not have the optometry that we have nowadays. And so, in any way, but he was nearly blind, but he continued to be the high Kohen, and he relied more and more on young Shmuel, who had been given to him as a person to minister, to do more and more of his work. And it would be Behechal Hashem Asher Sham Aron Elokim. We just began, I showed you the Tabernacle, and that's where they were based in Shilo. And that night, Vayikra Hashem El Shmuel Vayomer Hineni, Samuel, Shmuel, heard a voice, Shmuel. And he responded, I'm coming. So he ran to Eli, and he said, here I am. I'm here, you called. And Eli said, Lo karati. Actually, I didn't call you. Shuv shchav, go back to bed. So Shmuel went back to bed. Vayosef Hashem kro od Shmuel. And God again called out, Shmuel. Vayakam Shmuel vayelech el Eli vayomer hineni. And again, Shmuel ran downstairs, good young man. He knows his master is very elderly. Goodness knows what he wants in the middle of the night. Here I am. And again, Eli said, I didn't call you. Shuv shechav, go back to bed. Ushmuel terem yadad Hashem. Now Shmuel had never yet encountered God, and God never before had revealed himself. So a third time, Vayosef Hashem kro Shmuel bashlishi. And now a third time, God called out Shmuel, Vayakam vayelech el Eli vayomer hineni, ki karatoli. And Shmuel again came and said, here I am, you called. Eli now understood it's God calling. And Eli said to Shmuel, go back to bed. And if God calls again, say, speak to me, God, because I, your servant, am listening. So Shmuel went back to his bed, and God called again, kepam b'pam, as before and before him, Shmuel, Shmuel. And this time Shmuel said exactly as instructed, Daber ki shomea avdecha. Please speak because I hear you. Your servant is listening. And God said to him, I'm about to do something that's really going to shake up the nation. And you're old enough, holy enough, more experienced enough now to be able to handle this, to handle the truth. Because what's going to happen is the day is coming soon that Eli is going to die, as well as his sons. They're all going to come to an end. Eli's household and his sons Chafni and Pinchas are going to die, all at one time, all in one day. And he's going to be punished. It's discussed in a different context. I don't want to go into it now. God says, I said to the house of Eli that I'm going to be punishing and ending the reign of your family. Vayishkav Shmuel ad haboker. That was a tough night for Shmuel. He went back to sleep, but that couldn't have been easy to sleep, having that kind of information, because you got to figure he grew up loving Eli very dearly. Imagine he's been handed to him as a young boy after he's been weaned from his mom, and this is the father he's known all his life, who's brought him and been his caregiver, his religious mentor, and he now understands that Eli's going to die soon, and he really doesn't want to tell him. And he's got to carry this. It's a heavy burden to carry at a young age. Shmuel was afraid to report his vision to Eli. And Eli, of course, said, well, what was it? What came up last night? Please, don't hold back. Let me know what God told you. Whatever he said. I mean, honestly, means kind of like almost like a vow that you'll be punished if you hold back. I need to know. All right. If you're going to put it that way, if you're telling me that I'm going to be cursed, God forbid, that there'll be a curse if I hold back. So here's what I've been told. This is what God told me about you and your sons, and the time is coming. Vayomar, and Eli says, Hashem hu hatov be'inav yaseh. God is God. Whatever he deems to be good, let him do. It's all for the best. And that, by the way, is a model for how a Jew is supposed to live her and his life. When bad things happen, one is supposed to try to find silver linings along the way. Bad is bad. You stub your toe, it hurts. And lots of other things that are a lot worse. And some things we could never come up with a quick answer, and some things we could never come up with any answer. But some things actually carry within them certain blessings. Without wasting more of your time on lung transplants, I will tell you this, what that has done for me is it's gotten me to start doing some of the things that I had been procrastinating on. There's a book I want to write. There are several books I want to write, and there's one that's a priority for me. And I kept putting it off. I mean, I was just going to keep putting it off. Every day is busy. I'll write the book tomorrow. I'll start working on the book tomorrow. You get a lung transplant. Now it's time to start working on the book. And so one day, whenever that day comes, God willing, the book will be done, and maybe some more books. Can you imagine what hit me when I went to the lung transplant people? They told me you were within one day of dying. And part of what went through my mind is, what about the book I was going to write? I didn't say it to them. I was thinking to myself, what about the book I was supposed to write? What about the 3 or 4 other books I want to write? What about certain paperwork I have to get done? Certain email passwords and usernames that I've got to tell Denise. I mean, I was going to do that tomorrow. And then they told me there is maybe no tomorrow if we don't find a lung for you. So I had to start giving her usernames and passwords. And so, in other words, even in bad things, now I'm not saying it's good to need a lung transplant. It's sort of like, kids, don't try that at home. But what I am saying is that even in bad things, there's a tremendous Jewish concept to step back a moment after the bad and to say, not that I'm glad for the bad, but did something good come out of this? Or what good can I make come out of this? It's a big thing. And for Eli, it's sort of helpful to him to know that time is running out. Vayagdal Shmuel continued growing and maturing. And so God began revealing himself more and more to Shmuel. Vayeda kol Yisrael midan v'ad Beersheva, ki naman Shmuel l'navi Hashem. The area of Dan, the tribe of Dan, one of the 12 tribes, Dan was born to Bilhah, the maidservant to Rachel. That's in the northernmost part of Israel. And Beersheba, is in the Negev, in the southernmost part of Israel. You remember that Arlo Guthrie song, the Woody Guthrie song, "This land is my land, this land is your land, from California to the New York mainland." So you can describe the United States. You could either list all nifty 50 states, there's a song for that too, which is right around like the song that never ends with all those states. Or you could say America from California to New York. And people know it's like the whole breadth of the country. In Israel, the expression is Midan va'ad Beersheba, from the northernmost point of Dan to the southern. When you refer to all of Israel geographically, that's a Hebrew expression, not just from the Bible. From Dan to Midan va'ad Beersheba, from Dan to Beersheba. So he was known all through the country. Everyone now knew. And remember, these are the old days. Nowadays, you have social media, you have mass communications, right? You could get something out on the news. Today, Samuel of Shilo was announced as the new prophet in Israel. In those days, it was something that passed by word of mouth, and the entire country got the word. Okay, so we continue. They understood who he is. Vayosef Hashem lahira'ot b'Shilo, and God continued making himself seen, appearing in Shilo. Ki nigla Hashem el Shmuel b'Shilo b'dvar Hashem, because that was Shmuel's base of operation. So that's where God was based. And if people wanted to go on Rosh Hashanah or any other time of year to make a special prayer to God, you know how people go to Israel and some go to the Kotel, to the Western Wall for a religious experience to put a note in the wall? So in those days, what they did instead was they would go to Shilo, and that's how they would get as close as they could. Okay, chapter 4. Vahidavar Shmuel l'chol Yisrael. Well, Shmuel conveyed to the people the command of God, and this is painful because it's his first public announcement to the entire nation. He's telling them God wants you to go to war, and this war is going to be a disaster. And in a way, it's like what Moshe Rabbeinu, what Moses encountered, where eventually Moshe gets the Jews out of Egypt. But originally Moshe comes to the people and says, God, there was this burning bush at Mount Horeb, in the desert, Mount Sinai. And God sent me back here to Egypt to tell Pharaoh to let the people go, to serve him. And the people were very excited. Then Moshe tells Pharaoh, God appeared to me and said, let my people go to serve me. Shalach otam v'yavduni. And Pharaoh said, if they have so much time to worry about serving God, let them start building their pyramids. Let them make bricks without me delivering the straw that's the basis for building the bricks. And the people turned on Moshe and they said, who asked you to come and help us? We don't want your help. We were doing badly enough without you. Now it's even worse. We already have to make bricks. Now we have to produce the same number of bricks. And they don't even give us the straw. So Moshe goes to God and says, why did you put me in this predicament? Where you've given me an assignment, a task in front of the entire nation. And it's a disaster. In the same way, Shmuel's first assignment is to tell the people to go to war, and the war is going to turn out bad. And there's a reason for it. We'll learn. So he tells them it's time to go to war with the Philistines, the Plishtim, which of course you've heard this from me before, but many of you have never attended one of my classes. Just a reminder, the Plishtim, the Philistines, 2,000 years ago when the Romans conquered the land of Israel and exiled the Jewish people from the land of Israel, the Romans wanted to be sure the Jews never go back. They wanted permanently to destroy the connection between the Jews and the Holy Land. So they renamed parts of the land. It was known as Israel. We're the people of Israel, Bnei Israel, the children of Israel. And they changed the name of the land. It had been Israel, and they decided to rename it its previous name, named for the people that were there before the Jews took Israel. Who were they? The Philistines, the Plishtim. And so it was known as Palestine. And for the next 2,000 years, Israel came to be known by cartographers on maps as Palestine. But Palestine is synonymous with Israel. It's not an Arab name. It's not an Arab country. It's Roman, named for the Philistines. And the name Palestine was so associated with Israel and the Jews that when the Jews returned in the 20th century, the late 1800s, early 1900s, and set up an English language newspaper in Jerusalem, it was called the Palestine Post. Only after the War of Independence was it renamed the Jerusalem Post. But for years, the Jewish newspaper was the Palestine Post. The JNF, Keren Kayemet L'Israel, Jewish National Fund, those blue boxes that you would put little coins into when you lit your Shabbos candles to plant trees in Israel, was known as the Jewish National Fund for Palestine. Jews raised money for Palestine. The United Jewish Appeal used to be called before 1948 the United Palestine Appeal. For the Plishtim, the Philistines, the renaming by the Romans for 2,000 years. And in 1948, they stopped calling it Palestine, they started calling it Israel. And then in 1964, an Arab named Ahmed Shukari wanted to start a terrorist organization to drive the Jews out of the land. 1964, 3 years before the 1967 Six-Day War. So Israel did not yet have Judea, Samaria, the so-called West Bank, or the Gaza. Jordan was holding on to the Judea, Samaria, the West Bank. Egypt was holding on to Gaza. All Israel had was its pre-1967 places, like Tel Aviv and Haifa. And Ahmed Shukari formed an organization to drive the Jews into the sea, the Mediterranean Sea, and to take Haifa, Tel Aviv. And he called the group the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, to liberate. You can't say I'm liberating Israel. The word Israel is a Jewish word. Even by non-Jews, everybody knows the Israelites are the Jews. So we're liberating Palestine. They did not even have an Arab name for the land. And to this day, in 1967, when Israel took Judea, Samaria, the so-called West Bank and Gaza, the Arabs had no land, had no name for that. So what are they going to call it, Judea? What are they going to call themselves, the Judean Liberation Organization? We Arabs have just murdered 12 Jews because the Jews are occupying Judea, our Arab land, give us back Judea from the Jewish occupation force. So they can't call it Judea and had no other name. So they call it the West Bank, which it isn't. And the only reason they call Gaza Gaza is because that's its biblical name and it doesn't have the word Jew in it. I just make this point when we see the word Philistine for their first guest appearance on our program. Okay. And the extra paradox is that the Arabs, until recently, with the proliferation of CNN and other American TV on satellite TV, so they now grow up and hear in English. It used to be that they couldn't pronounce the letter P. They could only pronounce it like a B, like pizza. I'll have cheese on my pizza. So they couldn't even pronounce their own land of Palestine. They pronounced it as Palestine. The whole thing's ridiculous. Okay, chapter 4. So Shmuel tells the people you have to go to war against the plishtim, the Philistines. So the Philistines got ready for battle, and they defeated the Jews. Israel was routed by the Philistines. Vayinagef, like the word magefa, a plague, like the 10 plagues. The Philistines routed the Jews, and they killed 4,000 Jews. The rabbis ask what happened, what went wrong. I'll get to it in a moment, what went wrong. And the nation asked the elders, what went wrong? If God commanded us to go to war, why did we lose? And lose 4,000 men. Let us bring with us from the city of Shilo, the Ark of the Covenant. Let us fetch the Ark of the Covenant from Shilo. And it will bring us our support. God will go to battle with us. It emerges, if you want God's miracles in battle during biblical times, you need to go to war with the Ark of the Covenant. You bring the Ark of the Covenant with you into battle. Perhaps you've seen movies of Civil War movies, and there would be one guy in the north and one guy in the south whose job it would be to carry the flag. A great movie, Glory. Do you ever see that movie, Glory, about that black unit in the north of the Union armies? And to have that guy who carries the northern flag. And I won't tell you more. It's a great emotional scene. Anyway, in battle, someone carries the flag. And then there are people who their job is to go with the drums. So even though other people are carrying weapons, there's the guy with the drums and he's not really armed. His job is to pound the drums so everyone marches in step. In biblical times, Jews, if you go to war, you need someone carrying the Ark of the Covenant. Actually, you need 4 to 8 Kohanes. And they had gone to battle without the Ark of the Covenant. So God's presence was not with them during that battle. Therefore, now they go to battle with the Ark of the Covenant. But there's going to be something else that the text is not telling us. There were 2 Arks of the Covenant, 2 Mishkanim. In each Ark of the Covenant, there were the 2 tablets. The covenant, we mentioned some of this on Sunday in the other context of splitting the Jordan River. That's a different class, a Bible text class. This is the Shmuel class. But it happened to be in both classes, we covered the Ark of the Covenant. In the Ark of the Covenant, so what was in the Ark? What was in that closet? There were 3 things. There was a jar, a glass jar of manna from heaven. The food that came down from heaven for 40 years every day, except for Shabbat, feeding the nation as they sojourned in the desert. God instructed Aaron the Kohen, to gather enough to fill 1 glass jar, and that would not become putrid, it would not decay, and would forever be a testimony for people to look and see That's the food that God rained down from heaven. So the manna was in the ark. Secondly, there was a rod, Aaron's rod, which miraculously sprouted almonds in the story of Korach, around chapter 16 of the book of Numbers, Sefer Bamidbar. That was kept in the ark. And the tablets that Moshe brought down from Mount Sinai, the so-called 10 Commandments, or actually a better translation, the 10 Pronouncements, or the 10 Dicta. As you remember, Moshe brought down the 2 tablets, saw the people with a golden calf, and hurled the tablets to the ground. They broke. And then 40 days later went back on Mount Sinai and received 2 new tablets. So one of the 2 Arks of the Covenant held within it the 2 tablets that Moshe brought down the second time, and the other Ark of the Covenant that they kept alongside it had within that one the broken tablets. God wanted them to keep the Mishkan, the Tabernacle, with the unbroken, complete tablets permanently in Shilo until such time as it would be uprooted. And when they would go to battle, they were supposed to bring the other ark, the one with the broken tablets. So for the first battle, they went without any ark, and 4,000 died. So they determined we should have brought the ark. Nikcha elena mishilo et Aron Brit Hashem. Let us go back to Shilo and bring with us the Ark of the Covenant. V'yavo b'kirbeinu, and it will be in our midst. V'yoshienu mikaf oivenu, and God will protect us. V'yashlacha am Shilo, v'yasumi sham et Aron Brit Hashem. So they went back to Shilo, and they took the Ark of the Covenant of Hashem Tzvakot Yoshev Kruvim, V'sham b'nei Eli imaron Brit Elokim Chafni Pinchas. And when they went to Shilo, to the compound, it was always guarded by Eli the Kohen, the man in his 90s, and his sons Chafni and Pinchas, who were his sons, the assistant Kohanim, the assistant Kohens. And if they're going to carry the Ark of the Covenant away from Shilo, either one, it must be accompanied by Kohens, Kohanim, namely the sons Chafni and Pinchas. Okay. So Vahayakav Aron Brit Hashem L'machaneh. Well, so they all bring the Ark of the Covenant into the military camp, and now go back to battle the Philistines. This time accompanied by Chafni and Pinchas, the sons of Eli the Kohen. Vayarayu Kol Yisrael Teruah Gdolah, and they had their shofar. At battle, you blow the shofar, and it makes a tremendous sound, trumpet sounds, and war. Vayishmu Plishtim et Kol HaTeruah, Vayomru Mek Kol HaTeruah Gdolah, Hazok b'Machaneh Evrim. And when the Philistines heard the enormous ruckus of the trumpet sounds of the shofars, the shofrot, they were saying, "What is this? The Jews are going to war." Now they said, "Aha, they're making war on us, and this time they're bringing their Ark of the Covenant." And the Philistines were afraid because they knew what happened in the 10 plagues. It was known all over the place. Hundreds of years later, they knew about the miracle of the 10 plagues. Just as it'll be a long, long time before people forget about the earthquake in Turkey, certain things, natural disasters, word spreads quickly. Well, the natural disasters that hit Egypt with the 10 plagues, only they were miraculous disasters. They were known, and because they were miraculous, the surrounding countries were terrified of the Jews coming, and they were terrified, the Philistines. Oi lonu. Oi means in English what it means in Hebrew. Oi, literally. Oh, why? Okay, they have to translate it. Whoa. Stick with oi. Oi lonu. We are in big trouble, we Philistines, because now the Jews are coming with their ark. This is not what we had yesterday. Oy lanu, woe unto us. Who's going to save us from their very strong God? That's the God who smote the Egyptians with all those plagues in the desert that we all learned about in Philistine history class, AP Philistine history. Hitchasku, Fiulanashim Plishtim. Hey, look, we don't have a choice. These are the Philistines talking. We don't have a choice. We got to go to war. Yesterday was great. We killed 4,000 Jews. Now they're bringing the ark. It's not going to be good, but what are we going to do? Just stand there and get wiped? We got to go to war? Penta Avdullah Ivrim, otherwise they're going to end up their slaves. So let's go to war. Whatever happens, happens. Well, guess what? Well, guess what? The Philistines go to war and they defeat the Jews again, to their own surprise. But the Hiyamakagdola, by Paul Yisrael Shloshim El Fragli, 30,000 Jewish soldiers died. Philistines couldn't believe it. Neither could the Jews. What happened? The Jews brought the wrong ark. The Jews brought with them the ark with the two actual tablets. They were supposed to bring the ark with the broken tablets. They brought the wrong ark. And because of this, they lost the battle, and the Philistines actually seized the ark as part of the spoils of war. The ark with the actual two tablets that Moshe brought the second time. Now, the Philistines rejoiced beyond words. Look at the spoils we have. We have their holy tablet. We have their holy, look at this. We have their holy ark. But, be careful what you ask for, because you just may get it. So, V'aron Elokim Nilkach, the ark of God was taken with the two holy tablets. Ushnei b'nei Eli metu, and the two sons of Eli, Chofni and Pinchas, died. Because what was their job? Their job as the Kohanim was to stand guard over the tablet, over the ark. So when the ark was taken, they defended it to the death. Vayarutz ish ben yamin me'amaracha, vayavo Shilo b'yomahu umedav kruim, a survivor from the battle, a Benjaminite, raced back to Shilo with torn garments. His face and hair was filled with the soil of the battlefield. And there was 98-year-old Eli sitting on a chair. And Hayali bo chared al aron Elokim, and his heart was terrified, was fearful, because they had taken the Ark of the Covenant out of Shilo to battle. He was worried about the Ark. And this Benjaminite came and told everybody in the city what just happened in battle. 30,000 Jews died, including Chofni and Pinchas. Vayishma Eli kol hatza'aka, a 98-year-old Eli who was hard of vision but still had good hearing, heard there was screaming and crying throughout the city of Shilo. Vayomer mer hakol ha'hamon hazeh. He asked, what's the wailing? What's going on? V'ha'ish miher v'yavo v'yaged le'Eli, and this announcer from Benjamin came and told Eli. The Eli ben tishim u'shmona shana ve'einav kama v'lo yachol lirot. Eli was 98 years old, unable to see. Vayomer ha'ish el Eli, anochi ba'am min hamaracha. And the man said to Eli the Kohen, hi Kohen, I just came back from the battlefield, Yani, min hamaracha nasti hayom. I fled from the battlefield. Vayomer mehaya hadavar b'ni. And Eli said, my son, so what happened? Vaya'an hamavaser vayomer. And the fellow bringing the tidings said, Nas Yisrael ifnei plishtim v'gam hagef hagedolah The Jews had to run away from the Philistines. There was a terrible slaughter today against the nation. And your two sons, Chafni and Pinchas, were killed. The Aron Elokim no Kacha, and the Ark of God was taken. And while Eli's heart undoubtedly sank when he heard that his sons died, but when he heard that the Ark of God was taken, when he heard that God's Ark had been taken, the Ark holding the two tablets, he fell and he died. He broke his neck as he died. And he died. Shofetis Yisrael Arba'im Shana, and that brought to an end his reign as the chief Kohen and judge among the Jews for 40 years. V'chalalto eshet Pinchas hara. Meanwhile, of those two sons who died, Chofni and Pinchas, Pinchas's wife was in labor and giving birth on that day. But Tishmata Shmuel El Hilakach Aron Elokim. And when she heard not only that her husband died, but again, that the Ark of the Covenant was taken, Umet Chamiha, and she heard that her father-in-law had died, V'isha and her husband, V'tichrava Teled she Kinepchualat Saraha, she went into labor, she gave birth, and she died in labor. Vatikrala Na'ar Ichavod, and the child was named Ichabod. Ichavod, without honor. Without Chavod, kavod, honor. Gala Kavod Yisrael, because on this day that the child was born, honor was taken away from the Jews. El Hilakach Aron HaElokim, because the Ark of the Covenant of God was taken from the Jews, and their religious spiritual leader of 40 years, Eli the High Kohen, had died, and her husband, Pinchas, had died. Vatomer Galah Chavod Yisrael, the word Gala like Gullus, Galiot, Golut, honor, covet, has been exiled from Israel, Ki Nilkach Aron HaElokim, because God's Ark of the Covenant was taken. So we're leaving off tonight, exactly at 8 o'clock. These are 1-hour classes. I want you to be able to schedule your evenings reliably. He said we'll be done at 8 Pacific time. Heck of a thing, he does it. We stop at a very, very tough moment. Things will get better, but you notice how extraordinary the faith of the people was, that as much as the tragedy at war and the mass deaths and the loss of leaders, that which really wiped everybody out was the idea of the fall of the Ark of the Covenant. But have faith that it's coming back. Thank you very much for attending. And this is the week that we returned after a 1-year hiatus. And I'm so grateful for you, because you give me the opportunity to teach Torah again, which gives my life meaning and justifies the lung transplant team at Cedars-Sinai keeping me around. Because if the only reason they kept me around is to watch State of the Union addresses and Super Bowls, let me tell you, ain't worth it. So thanks very much, and God willing, we'll meet again next week. Bye-bye.